I'm Nicole Corbett. I'm the CEO of Warn. Warn is a mission-based creative agency focused on women-led businesses. Helping women become successful in business is my life's passion. And it's usually what I talk about all the time. I can't stop talking about it, but it's not what I want to talk about tonight. Tonight, I want to share a story, a deeply personal story of a spiritual adventure that I went on that deeply impacted who I am today. In 2007, I was a junior at the George Washington University in DC. I was majoring in conflict and security. I was on a clear path forward. I lived only a few blocks from the White House. It was a year before Obama got elected, and I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to become a nuclear nonproliferation expert and change the world by working through the US government. I was on a clear, determined path. I felt smart, and I felt like I had my shit together. So the next step, that same year, I was offered a scholarship from the Department of Defense to learn Korean in Korea, to move there for a year, to learn the language for national security purposes. So the deal would be I would move to Seoul for a year by myself, I would learn the language, and then I would come back to DC to work in a government position, either in the CIA, the FBI, or another security or intelligence agency to put my language skills to use and pay back the government. So I didn't really think that much about it. I decided this sounds like a great idea. I really want to move to Asia. I'm going to do it. So I got on a plane. I landed in Seoul at 3 a.m. by myself. I didn't know anyone at all. I didn't have any friends there. I didn't speak the language. I had never had Korean food. I only had the address to a room that I had found on the Korean version of Craigslist. So it was honestly terrifying. I landed in a city of 30 million people where I felt like I was the only foreigner. I was the only non-Korean person. I felt so out of my element. Really, the culture shock was intense. And eventually, I got over that initial culture shock, and I started to get into my schedule. I had 6 hours a day of Korean language lessons. I eventually moved in with a Korean family full-time who spoke to me only in Korean, and I started to get curious about exploring Seoul. And the thing that I was really interested in outside of my intensive language learning was Zen Buddhism. Now, I had been interested in this before, and I had read books about it, but I hadn't really mentally prepared myself for what I could explore related to Buddhism in Korea. And I started to spend all of my free time trying to find Dharma talks in English, trying to explore random Buddhist temples on the outskirts of Seoul. And that would mean I would get online, I would try to translate a Korean temple website, I would then get on a bus, and then I'd get on a subway, and then I'd get into a taxi, and then eventually I'd find my way to some hidden temple throughout Seoul. And one of those times in particular, I found myself at this hillside, this sort of nestled hillside temple in the northeast region of Seoul. I made my way in, and I admired the white lanterns hanging outside the temple. I just quietly made my way into the meditation hall and looked at the golden Buddhas. I would explore the kitchen where these old Korean ladies would be making lunch. And I'd find my way to a room to do, let's say, 30 minutes of sitting, which is meditation essentially in Zen, and then 30 minutes of Dharma talk with a monk or a Zen teacher. And so one of those particular times after I went through, my meditation practice and the Dharma talk, I decided that I was just going to explore the temple and look around because I didn't really know anybody, and I was just going to see what I found. And I made my way into the kitchen. I passed this room where the door was cracked, and I could see someone in this little office sitting at a computer. And so I stuck my head in and I found myself face to face with this woman. She had a shaved head. She was wearing monk's robes, but she wasn't Korean. And I said hello, and she immediately seemed excited because she could tell I spoke English, and she shared that she needed to tell her personal story to a local publication and she needed help translating that story. So I sat down and I listened to the story, and I realized that she was actually from Poland. She originally grew up in Poland and joined a temple in Poland and decided that she was going to become a full-time Buddhist nun and follow this particular Korean Zen master to Korea. And she'd done that 20 years before, and she'd been practicing in Korea ever since. So when I left that day, I felt like something special had happened, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. There was something about her. We had this special connection, and I left feeling like I'd made a friend. And so I came back the next weekend, and I did the same thing over again, and we kind of hung out and chatted again, and then I did it the next weekend and the weekend after that, and I just kept coming back. And we kept getting to know each other better, and I kept reading more and more about Buddhism and practicing, kind of soaking it all up. And then late into the summer, later into that year, she got in touch with me and said, "Would you like to join me on my solo summer retreat this year?" Now, every summer and winter, monks in the Mahayana tradition in Korea do a summer and a winter solo silent retreat. And I felt excited and flattered that she was inviting me to join her on this retreat. So I knew I had to go. I immediately said yes, and I got on a fast train from Seoul to Gyeongju the next day. I really didn't bring anything. I brought a toothbrush. I knew I wasn't going to need much, and I just showed up. And when I got off the train, there was a man in a pickup truck who picked me up and drove me to the foot of a hillside covered in rice paddies and just dropped me off. Nice gentleman. And so I was there, and then I was just like, okay, well, I guess I need to walk up this tiny path, and I made my way up, and then I was met by a tiny Korean woman who was a female monk, and she said, "Oh, hi, you must be Kwon Mi's friend." And I said, "Yes, that's me." And she said, "Oh, great, welcome to the temple. How long will you be staying?" And I said, I was thinking, I don't want to impose, I don't know. I was like, "Oh, I'm just staying a few days." And she said, "You could stay the rest of your life." I knew she was serious. so I was kind of scared, but I decided to follow her up to the rest of the temple. And it was this really small little complex. So there was just one room when you slept, one tiny room in the kitchen where these two 90-year-old grandmas helping to take care of her and making food. And then a little bit higher up, there was a temple where you would do meditation and chanting with a little Buddha in the temple. So my job was to A, wash dishes, and B, follow Kwon Mi and help her in her meditation journey, and just assist her and not get in her way and sort of do my own thing throughout the week. There was our routine was mostly this. This is what all monks follow in the temple. Go to bed at 8, wake up at 3. At 3, go straight to the meditation temple, do chanting, meditation, then have breakfast in silence, clean up your breakfast, do a walk, do chores, do chanting, maybe have a tea, then sort of do it all over again and go back to sleep at 8. And it seemed like it could be really relaxing, but honestly, it was really exhausting. And I was really embarrassed that I couldn't stay awake for the first 3 days. I was just so tired. Like my eyes would close all the time, and I was like, I'm doing it wrong. And I was just really it was just so super hard. And it was me alone with my neuroses that, I thought I was just gonna sort of like be Zen and be on top of the temple and have a clear mind. But honestly, like all my shit followed me to this temple, even though it was supposed to be really relaxing. So after the first 3 days were really grueling. And then later I started to just sort of like give up and be like, fine, I'm here. I need to just relax into this, enjoy this. And so by the end of it, I felt a little more comfortable. I wasn't as tired. And my friend Kwon Mi said, "Hey, I think that you seem to really like this. Maybe you should stay. Maybe you should stay, and you should go to this other temple farther in Korea where there's a bunch of international monks. You should become a nun, and that place will be awesome because they'll break your mind. I wasn't ready to sign up to be broken necessarily. That wasn't what I was looking for. I knew I had unfinished business back in DC, mainly graduating and continuing with my life that I had set up this whole time. So I said, no, I'm not ready for that. I think I need to go back, but I promise you I'll come back. So after that, I got on a train to go back to Seoul because I was leaving only days later. Was the end of my study abroad. So the second that I got on the train, this strange thing happened. It was like information overload. It was like the traffic, the Korean karaoke, the cell phones, the magazines, the everything, basically. It was just total overload after being in silence for a week. And my reaction to that was to just sort of take myself out of my body. So I was sitting in this train seat and I just closed my eyes and took myself out of my body. I could feel myself sort of floating up above, and I could see myself sitting in the seat, and then I could see the train, and then I could see the city, and then I could see the country. And it was like someone pushed zoom out on Google Earth, and suddenly I was floating up in space and I could see the world. And nothing looked the same anymore. The things that I thought were important before weren't important at all. And I realized I was having this moment of a critical life decision. I could continue on this path that I was on, that everyone else thought was smart and important and meaningful and necessary, or I could do something radical, which was follow my creative calling and take an really uncharted path in a different direction that I didn't know where it would lead, but that would actually feed my soul. So in that moment, I decided to take the blue pill, or is it the red pill? I'm not sure. And I knew I could never be the same person again. I had fundamentally changed. My brain was different after that. And so I went home and decided that I was going to do something completely different. I was going to start over. I was going to do something creative. And years later, I run my own creative company with an incredible group of 12 women that's incredibly meaningful to me, and I feel like I'm living my life's purpose. And I'm telling you this because I feel like the lesson in this for me was that it's really important to listen to that inner voice. And that voice is always there if you're willing to listen to it, and it will never lead you astray if you say yes to it. In fact, it can be the thing that helps you get to a point where your life is so incredible and you wake up every morning feeling like this is truly who you are and you're living your life's purpose. And it'll never lead you astray. It certainly didn't for me. And I've got to admit, I'm really glad I am not the North Korea expert at the State Department today. That is not what would be making me happy right now in comparison to what I do today. And I'm happy to report that Kwanmi and I, 10 years later, still text every few days. In fact, I read a message from her right before this. I saw her earlier this year, and I've been able to repay the great karma that she gave me in changing my life and inviting me on that retreat that totally changed the direction of my career, and repay some of that kindness that she gave to me back to her. So 10 years later, we're still soul sisters, supporting each other, and there for each other in the most critical points in life. Thank you so much.